Hello, and thank you for joining me for another Eunuch Corner Club. This week, a topic that my loyal Yizraelites will know that I am loath to speak about too much is transgender issues. Because I don't want to be pigeonholed as yet another tranny with a loud mouth. I also don't want to be pigeonholed as some kind of activist or anti-activist specifically around LGBT rights or LGBTism. Although you can definitely see from my previous works, there is a bit of overlap. But there is something that's been eating at me lately. For those of you who follow Rose of Dawn, something that came up on her stream yesterday with other trannies made me want to pontificate how #true trans people suffer at the hands of modern trans activism instead of it helping us like it's supposed to. And of course, since today is all about the gay, we're going to be vaping, and today's rig is a beautiful rainbow anodized aluminum. Still gay. There is one primary point I would like to bring up about the narrative around transgender people today. The war over the phrase trans women are women that happens on Twitter and in academia circles. Of course, this is something that intersectionals, radical feminists, those kind of people talk about. It really starts to hurt trans people where the rubber meets the road, which is activism specifically around universities and how that correlates to the type of coverage we get based upon the awareness that we have. And that ties directly into the laws and statutes about how we as trans people or intersex people get medical assistance. Trans women are women is both true and false because of the dual nature of what gender means to people who talk about it. To the vast majority of people on planet Earth, male and female is completely and in all ways synonymous with man and woman. I would say it's over 90% of people on planet Earth. And even, I would wager, above 80% in the Western world. Man and woman being separate from sex, separate from biology, is not just a relatively new thing to talk about, but it's also a very obscure thing to talk about in academia, even in the modern era. Intersectional leftists, the identitarian Marxists, they still aren't the majority of people in academia. At big-time universities, they might be close to getting 50% or a majority, but when you take into account all fields of study, they're still in a minority. So the concept of gender being a social performative bundle of learned and conscious behaviors being divorced from biology is a very rare and unusual thing. It's not something that's supported, in my opinion, by modern science of psychology, neurology, and all that mess. I believe, from what I have experienced and from the hundreds of trans people I've worked with directly and the thousands of trans and intersex people I've known, there is an obvious and direct correlation between biology and what the intersectionals or the modern gender people might call performative gender, or the performances of a gender. I'm not going to bore my viewers because I'm sure most of you know what I'm talking about. To boil it down, the man trope in our society is because of the male sex, and the woman trope is because of the female sex. They are inexorably linked, in my opinion. Those who try to separate these two come to a horrible fallacy, a fjord they cannot cross, a chasm that they cannot see the other side of. We've seen it with the, let's be fair and call him a man, that supposedly has some kind of academic station that argued with Jordan Peterson a couple of years ago, saying how, well, I'll just let him speak for himself.
Basically, it's not correct that there is such a thing as biological sex, and I'm a historian of medicine. I can unpack that for you at great length if you want, but in the interest of time, I won't.
People like him, they would have us believe that the entirety of science of the last several hundred years is wrong about what we believe about minds, behaviors, sex cells, hormones, behavioral patterns, bone density, muscle fiber patterns, that kind of thing, about men and women and how they differ. This is, of course, ludicrous. And pretty much anyone I would imagine who is worth half of a shit in any STEM field knows this is ludicrous. So why? Do we want people that believe this nonsense to be activists for us? They don't help us. Because here comes the conundrum. They say trans women are women. Okay. Then you ask them to define what a woman or a man is. If you're lucky, you'll get no answer at all, and they can't come back with anything. If you're unlucky, you'll get a mix of Marxist and radical feminist diatribe about structures of society and performative things and the weight of what you have to learn and go through versus internalized this and that. They will not say adult human female or adult human male. They won't say that. Because if they said that, it would completely neuter and destroy the other part of the narrative, which is one can choose or self-determine a sex or gender. And the reason I say sex or gender is a large portion of this, let's call them the gender critical crowd for now. They seem to believe that gender and sex are either make-believe or completely self-determinant and are not connected to what I would call the scientific world. So they can't have their cake and eat it too. This is the Rubicon that they cannot cross. Because if they say, okay, trans people are people who need to have surgeries and medicines to make their biology opposite from what they have, then they are affirming that biology, neurology, hormones, and all that stuff is a hard and real truth and the core, let's not call it the core, let's call it the primary pillar of gender. They have to cede that, but they can't to make the other part, what they are consciously choosing to be activists about, of the unmaking gender, saying that gender is a choice, that what we know about biological sex being binary is untrue and all that crazy mess. It cannot hold up even with their own words, even with their own doctrine and dogma. It cannot hold up. What I dislike about saying trans women are women is it is a loaded and hostile phrase against people who are the vast majority, who believe that a man is a man because he has a penis, he is male, he has a beard, he has male traits, or a woman is a woman because she can gestate a fetus and give birth to another member of our species. She can breastfeed. The vast majority of people believe these things when it comes to male and female, man and woman. It's a disservice to people who are not intersectional weirdos and who are not trans to attempt to annul these things. I think that that is the second major flaw in the LGBT or gender activists that push this gender and sex isn't real narrative, this trans women are women narrative, because I don't think that they understand just how outnumbered they are and how alienating the things they say are to normal people, because most people are normal cisgendered heterosexual people. And when you tell them the core of their being is make-believe, or that some imaginary patriarchy or invisible series of social constructs renders their identity and their primary function for existence null and void, they're going to reject you as not only the hypocritical, but the lunatic that you sound like you are. Because you're going to say to a woman, the fact that you have breasts and can breastfeed and have gestated two feti, if it's even the plural of fetuses, I don't know, and you have two children and you are a mother, you have a husband, you are a Christian in a heterosexual marriage, that's all actually lies. None of that is real, and there's no difference between you and your husband at a genetic level, at a cultural level. It is so insane that it would take someone a lot of mind-expanding drugs and probably years of practice and discussion to even wrap their head around such a thing. So not only is this trans women are women, gender isn't real other than what we declare stuff baloney, but it's self-defeating. The more that these people push this stuff, the less they are going to have truck with the vast majority of the populace. And let us not forget, the people that push for this do not breed. They do not make more of themselves. So the only way that they can spread their ideas and perpetuate what they believe is to, like a virus, like a cancer, infect other healthy minds, other healthy cells. So wouldn't you want to go about that by using actual methods of persuasion, actual charismatic methods of persuading someone to your side? You would think so, right? But they don't. It's heavy-handed, childlike tantrum force that they push their lunacy with. That's why I think that we are seeing the death of this kind of ideology, of this non-gendered, sex isn't real malarkey. I think we're seeing the end of it. I think that enough people in enough places are pushing back. And quite frankly, a lot of the people that push this stuff are women who are getting older, and they're realizing they can't have men and they can't have children unless they sing and dance to a different tune, because almost no man worth a shit would have them. And I think that's another main reason that this insanity is dying out, is people are abandoning this. They're stopping their activism because they want to have families. They want to be normal and live a life. And that is the end of my thought train on this topic. Of course, with my experiences and the people that I've known and what I've done, I could talk forever about gender and LGBT stuff and sex and all that. But I'm going to keep my delivery short because I want to ask you some questions. Those of you who watch me, or those of you that are new to me, I would like to hear your opinion down below. Do you think I'm correct about two things? Do you think I'm correct in my assessment of the claim about trans women being women and sex and gender being either fluid or completely imaginary, being self-defeating with the modern LGBT trans activist narrative? And secondly, do you agree with my opinion that we are seeing the end of it? Because what we see in statistics is that many women of middle and older age are changing their ways, or at least slowing down on the activism, partly because they realize how lonely and miserable they are. Number two, because they are simply being outbred by people who don't agree with such things. Do you think I'm right about that? Because I believe I'm starting to see that in America. Now, keep in mind, I moved away from a very progressive, ridiculous city to a rather tepid, middle-of-the-road American city. It's not ultra-conservative by any means, but it's a more general representation of America. There are gay bars here. People can be openly gay, but also there are a lot of churches, and people aren't ashamed to have a Gadsden flag or a Confederate flag on their Confederate flag.
Well, Freud was right.
Confederate flag on their property. But I wouldn't say that this is a ridiculously conservative or heavily right-wing area because of the aforementioned. So I think that I am starting to see at least America have a major pushback. And if what we have seen in the elections of the UK and Canada recently are any suggestion, I think that we're seeing a rather strong push to return to normalcy. And I think that this trans lunacy might be dying out. I'm not saying that there won't be trans people and there won't be people like me or people like Rose of Dawn. I just think that the lunatics around the radical feminism, the intersectional stuff, and the unhinged trans ideology, I think we're going to see die out in the next decade. At least I hope so. So, I have made a request down below and what about, and I look forward to reading them, and if there are any particularly juicy comments or responses, I might even invite you to have a discussion with me like I did with Kaza recently. I used to end my videos by saying God bless, and I think that there's a better way to end my videos. I think I'm going to start saying peace and profits. So, peace and profits, everyone.